Good afternoon, everyone. Um, we're so happy that you could join us today for this special broadcast being brought to you by the Lived Black Experience Project, which is in association with the Southside Community Association and the Murdoch Community Center. Today, we are doing a special broadcast in response to Ms. Kamala Harris being appointed as Mr. Biden's candidate choice for VP. And these conversations are going on all over in our professional circles, in our personal circles, about this being a first. But to begin our conversation, I'd like to put it out there in our marketing that we have 3 photos, and of course, one is of Ms. Kamala Harris, but there's also a photo of Ms. Charlene Mitchell, who actually was the first woman to run for U.S. president back in 1968. And then the other photo is of Ms. Shirley, who during 1968 was elected to Congress. And so now here we are with Ms. Kamala Harris, and that is what we want to talk about today, being the first Black woman. And so our resident facilitator, Sister Cara House, can you introduce our returning guest and get us started?
Absolutely. Joining us again is Ms. Ramona Curtis, who is the Director of Diversity Outreach Programs at Tulsa Community College. She is responsible for diversity outreach programs, including the Diversity Outreach Center. She retired from Baylor University in 2019 after 19 years of service. In 2015, she won the Baylor University Diversity Enhancement Award for her tireless work on campus and in and outside of the community to promote diversity in its many forms, to seek social justice, and to inspire cultural competency. Over the past few decades, Ms. Curtis has spearheaded many initiatives to promote diversity, including the church swap, an attempt to dismantle the most segregated hour in America. She has coordinated Undoing Racism, a program which focuses on understanding racism and how we can all work together to undo its negative effects. She speaks throughout the world on leadership, diversity, and other professional development topics. She holds a bachelor's in communication from the University of Texas at Arlington, a master's of sociology from Prairie View A&M University, and is currently a doctoral student at Prairie View A&M University studying educational leadership.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. We're really happy to have you back.
Yes. So where do we want to begin?
Maybe, Ms. Lewis, if you could give us some of the background on the women who were put up on the flyer for the event, just a little bit of information about how they helped to center this conversation.
Well, we have, I think how this all began was, people are hailing Ms. Harris as being the first, and we're all excited. And so, but for those who perhaps have been around a little longer or have studied Black history or just, have followed politics, we celebrate and we're happy about Ms. Harris and this accomplishment. But, I think a big thing in the Black community is that we always recognize or acknowledge in one way or another our ancestors or those who came before us. And so for a lot of us, um, we immediately went back to, hey, no, Ms. Harris is not the first. There was Miss Mitchell, who actually ran for president. And then Miss Shirley Chisholm came along same year in '68 and was voted into Congress and then would make a run also for US president. So there were two women of color of African descent, two Black women who actually walked this journey or this path before Ms. Harris. And so here we are today, to talk about being the first Black woman. And like I always say about these broadcasts, we do these because we want to inform, educate, and enlighten. And for me today, this topic really is an opportunity to set the record straight.
So let's talk about that idea of the first Black woman. I think so often when we get into any achievement by a Black woman or a woman of color, there is just that sense that at every moment it becomes that first for us, and almost that forgetfulness of the past, or the idea that this new first represents the be-all end-all of Black achievement or anything like that. So why is it that we think that tends to happen, in particular when it comes to Black women or women of color? Why is every moment within our history seen as this first, as though there aren't those historical precedents that have been set before, or even why is it that it's seen as sort of the pinnacle of the achievement that we might have as Black women or as Black people in general?
Well, I think certainly being the first in anything in 2020 has always, it's caused me pause to say, why is this just now happening? Because for some reason, people want to know, is America ready for a first? I was like, what kind of question is that? When we see feminism, if we look at the three waves of feminism, that first wave of feminism, for us to have an identity, just as women, to have an identity where we were no longer property of our husbands. And then the second wave, to really talk about those issues that really focus on who we are as women. What do women want? What are those political issues for women? What does that look like? But in this third wave, which in the 90s it is about the intersectionality of women. We're finally hearing voices of women of color, of women with disabilities, of women in different socioeconomic levels. And so I think that we are finding that voice now, and we are no longer normalizing what people think is that whole white woman stereotype, or it has to be a white woman first and then the women of color follow behind it. I think we are seeing now that we need to talk about what intersectionality looks like, and it's not whether or not who's ready for first. Because I think when you talk about whether or not we're ready, you discount the credibility of those who have worked hard to get their positions as to where they are. And for people of color, we all grew up with, you have to work twice as hard to get half as much. So to see someone like Charlene Mitchell in the 60s to rise to a level of running for president, and then to see Shirley Chisholm in 1972 to run on a national for a national Democratic nomination, working towards that, then you see there that intersectionality, and it's not about who is ready for this woman, this woman of color. It is about, don't discount the road that she has had in getting there. And I think that that's important for us to think about. So these issues, or these insensitive remarks about Joe and the hoe and all of these things, that is discounting what women have fought for years, and particularly Black women. And to be the first, I've been the first, and certainly not on a national level, but on a state level, so the first African American to run a male correctional facility in Tom Green County, Texas. And for me, that is a heavy load to be the first African American, and I was young. I was in my 30s during that time, and there were a lot of people, white males, who worked for me in this facility, who were military men, and it was challenging. It was so challenging, but for me to be in that position, there was a point of pride. There, not just the pride of me being able to move to that level in my 30s, but also a point of pride for my ancestors to be the first. So it was a heavy load on my shoulders to be able to be in that space as the first, not just the first African American, but the first woman, period, the first, not just the first woman, but the first African American to run that facility. And it was challenging. So the other piece is there's a strong sense of responsibility that's greater than probably any other for Black women, because we know the schemas that we have to work through, and we know that people are looking at us, waiting to stereotype us. And so, I think I said this before when I was on before, that fifth habit of Stephen Covey's resonated so much with me, is you have to seek first to understand, then to be understood. You have just about a totally white staff who's wanting to know whether or not you're fair, and what are you bringing to the table, and what are you gonna give to us in terms of what we have to do. I remember within my first few weeks there, I had a young man come into my office, and he was eating licorice jelly beans, just popping them in his mouth one at a time. And he looked at one and he said, "I guess Black really is beautiful." And so you have to have this sense of responsibility that, I've got a greater cause for that comment, but I'm going to work through it, And so one of the things that I did quickly is my staff, I had training for them. I talked to my chief, and I had training for them on understanding and working with African Americans, because I told them, look, y'all, I am comfortable being an African American. I just need you to be comfortable with me and see me as the director of this facility, and not just an African American. And so that piece was there as well. I think for Kamala, one of the things that I really love about her, this higher call to be a bridge, is she acknowledged that she's from an HBCU background. She acknowledged that, the NPHC, the Alpha Kappa Alpha, those things that resonate in our community that are part of Black excellence. And I love that piece too. So, she is there for everyone, but she's not going to discount who she is. And that, that was one of the things that I wanted to do there. And I'll never forget, everybody got Christmas cards with Santa Claus, and he was Black. And people were like, what in the world has landed here in San Angelo, Texas? But once they knew me and who I was, and there was a learning about our culture, and it wasn't in a way that was alienating anyone. It was wonderful. It was so wonderful. I know people were saying before I got the position, they said, there was a particular individual there. They said, wait till he finds out our new director is going to be a woman. They said, no, wait till he finds out she's going to be Black. But I will tell you, me and that young man, and he was an older man, and he was a white man, but he and I had the best relationship people might assume that things are going to be a certain way, but that's from them. That's from their background. That's what they're assuming. Those are the assumptions that are made. But with this point of pride, the strong sense of responsibility and understanding that you are going to be a bridge. You are going to you have to be that bridge, and it's on us to do that. But you have to lead with humility and with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, even when it gets hard, like I said, eating those black jelly beans, that was tough. But you have to practice empathy and humility when you're in those roles, but you have to be tough. You have to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to circle back to that idea that you presented of just that reduction of the accomplishment or the achievement that tends to happen, particularly with Black women, women of color, which is the idea that the reason that we got to that place is simply because we're Black. It has nothing to do with the hard work that you must have done to get into that position, the hard work that Kamala Harris must have done to be qualified as a vice presidential nominee, the hard work that women of color have historically done to reach those milestones or those places in their career that suddenly get erased because they must have only gotten it because they are a Black woman or because they're Black. So, and this might seem like an obvious question, but I think it's something that the audience really needs to hear is what is it that leads to that sort of pigeonholing? And what is it that we lose in that sort of pigeonholing? What gets lost in the narrative when we reduce someone simply to their color, or in the case of Black women in particular, their color and their gender?
Well, Ms. Lewis, did you want to handle that?
No, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the things that we fail to do when things like this happen is redefine what we think normal is to check ourselves on what we feel like this yardstick for normalcy is. And so when we don't realize how much of our environment is playing into us, and what we see, what we take in our world, we are processing what is normal. And so what happens is when normal changes, then we don't think about this climb that this Black girl has gone through, and even growing up as Kamala Harris did, being bused across town. We don't think about those experiences and how that was shaping this person and the way they see the world and how wonderfully they see their world changing before them and feel it inspirational, even though they're going through all of these microaggressions and stereotypes, misperceptions about who you are and all of those things. And then they start on this and they continue on that path to really building a successful career. But the rest of us are still seeing that same yardstick of what is normal. So then when our normal changes, we no longer see all white guys leading something or only old white guys running for something. We wonder, can this person do this? And that is something that is on us. We have got to change that as a nation. We have got to change that. It doesn't matter what background you come from. You can change that narrow-minded thinking and look and see that this person has traveled a long way to get to where they are now. Those barriers that were there before them, whether it be solely within their family or even culturally, from her Asian roots to her roots of being African. I mean, not being African, but being a Black person. Those roots too, and the struggle of the people in those communities. So it should lend itself to credibility that she is going to be a tough leader in this. It's not just about her degrees that she has, but she has seen some things that is going to cause her to be able to make some critical decisions much faster than someone who hasn't experienced those things and hadn't worked through those things. But we don't give that kind of credit. We don't give that credit. We want to know, is America ready to have a woman vice president in that long row of white male vice presidents? Are we ready to see that female face there? And I think that's something that we have to reckon with. We have to reckon with how we view her and how we view women, period, and what roles they should have. And when I looked at that stage at the Democratic National Convention and I saw the diversity that was there, it made me feel good. And this is what normal is. We need to get used to that. This is what normal is. And we can say we need to redefine it, but this is what it is. This is the Constitution at work. This is definitely the Constitution at work.
Yeah. I think I agree. I agree with everything that you're saying. But I'm still concerned about how do we need to educate our European American counterparts, brothers, sisters, colleagues, on how to approach this. Because on one hand, yes, we are excited. We have a woman of color that is on the path to the White House. But then how should we really be handling this in the workplace, in the boardroom, in the classroom? Because I think maybe maybe a European American brother or sister might be saying, okay, well, do I celebrate it? Or are you telling me no, not to celebrate it? So can we talk a little bit about that? Like, what's the etiquette here? What's the cultural etiquette here?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do is talk about the office. We don't need to talk about what the person's color or culture they're coming from. We need to talk about the office itself, the vice presidency, the administration. We talk about those things and look at her resume and how fit she is for the office. We forget this young lady is fit for the office of the vice presidency. But the narrative is so much on the fact that this is a woman and this is a woman of color that we're losing what a vice president is called to do, the leadership skills that this individual has. So when I engage my white counterparts, and I understand that there's a struggle for some of them, then we ourselves, we have to know, how do we talk to these individuals? What books do we want them to read? What articles should they be reading that will help not further alienate them, but that will bring them into the conversation? But I think you have to talk about what we need is a strong leader. I think that's what we do. Not a strong female Black leader. We need a strong leader in the vice presidency, and that's who she is. Yes, she's a female. Yes, she's a person of color, but let's not discount that she has had a very successful career to get her here. We would not be questioning that if this was a white male. We don't ask ourselves, is a white male fit for vice presidency? So I think that we have to look at the fitness she is for the duty that she is called to do. And in that, there are times, even within our own culture, there are times that we will pick a person apart because we're uncomfortable or because we're fearful of their life. I remember when President Obama was running, there were a lot of African Americans that were afraid to vote for him because they were fearful of his life. I mean, they knew he was fit to be president, but they did not want to see him assassinated, and really felt like that would put us back in race relations. So, we have to feel comfortable. We have to find a comfort zone in our people fit for office. We see what's going on in our current administration, the tweets about not having low-income housing in suburban areas. That is not leadership. This is Vice President of the United States here. And so we have to think in terms of, can someone serve the people? And that's why I think intersectionality plays such a big part in the way that this particular nominee can guide and can look at things, because she has seen it and she has been there and she's experienced it within her own daily life as she was a little girl in a stroller during the movement, being bused and all of those things. And now here the vice president the vice president nomination of someone who opposed busing. This is America. This is where we are now. These are good things. These are not bad things. And so that's the narrative we have to talk about. And then we also say you have to get your white fragility in check. You have to deal with that. You have to. I can't help you with that, but you can help yourself in that. See this person as a leader as you see other leaders. What is stopping you from seeing this person as a leader? And I think those are some things that we help them with. We said I may understand that it is hard for you to fathom what is going on right now. But at the same time, you are responsible to make sound decisions when it comes to the direction of the country. We can't just think about ourselves. I do believe that everyone deserves health care. Do you believe everyone deserves health care? Just the wealthy deserve it. It's those kind of things. Fair housing. Do you believe people deserve fair housing? So we have to look at that position and understand that is the way Kamala and anyone else, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, should be looking and thinking about that. But you do bring who you are to that table. But who you are should be celebrated, because your peripheral vision is great because of your experiences.
Right. Yeah. Sister Carol.
I want to go back to that question of leadership and qualification, because I think that's a big thing that we often see when it comes to Black women, women of color, people of color in general who are trying to step into these places of leadership. Is there's that sense that we have to be more educated, more experienced, more qualified in general. We have to be more of a leader. We have to be more accepting of different things. I think we saw it with President Obama, and that idea that he was only going to serve Black people. And those sorts of things where, again, it goes back to that idea of pigeonholing and the idea of how we can, as people of color, serve those broader communities. It's not something that we see often questioned with our, as Sister Bernadine puts it, our European counterparts. So why is it, is the question, why is it that Black women have to be more educated? They have to be more experienced. They have to be more, just period, when it comes to their leadership?
For me, it's simply because that's our way of campaigning to get our European American counterparts to see past the Blackness. So we work harder, our resume and our pages. We have more pages on our resume than the average, because we have been set up by the system of predominantly white men, that this is how we have to prove that we are qualified for whatever area of work that we're trying, or service that we're trying to provide. Is just not simple enough for us, or like for Miss Harris or Miss Mitchell or Miss Chisholm. It wasn't enough to say, hey, you know what, I love my country. I think that I have the qualifications and enough love and concern to lead my country. That just simply the system, the majority, the white men, the privileged, just would not let their college degree, their law degrees, their leadership experience be enough.
Well, if you study African American women post slavery Reconstruction period, and you see us, that whole Sojourner Truth Ain't I a Woman is going to ring hard with that. I mean, African American women or Black women have been struggling with white men since the Reconstruction period. Well, we know about slavery, but I mean, even in the Reconstruction period, when we did not want to no longer, many of us did not want to work in the fields and did not have to work in the fields, even though they were paying. And white slave owners were thinking, what can we do to get these women back in? Can you make them come back to the fields? Many times it was our husbands who were the ones to talk about where we would work, when we would work, as well as our children, and that was already the thing. So I think the white male, if he would look into his history and his relationship with Black women, would know that we are fit for the test. We have proved it. You have wanted us. We know we can. We know we're working hard. But for that resume, our parents have always told us, we have to work twice as hard to get half as much. They've always told us that. So growing up, wanting to not be the last or be the one that's the stereotypical African American, and working hard for that, at the same time hearing all of these racial microaggressions and really being passed over because someone is uncomfortable with who you are racially. We fought all of that, and we fought all of that, like I said, with empathy. We fought it with humility, and we have found a place. And and many African American women have fought that to the death, that it has really caused them so much pain that our hearts are giving out on us because of the racial stress it is to be a leader and to be an African American female leader. But we have always wanted to do what was right for everyone, because we know that last breadcrumb was ours. When you look at the Women's March in 1913, the fight that African American women had to do to just get in the march, and then not wanting us to walk with our delegation, but to walk in the back, to march in the back when finally we were able to do that. And so we've always had this sense of struggle, and if we use that to think about those who are marginalized in our communities, but use those leadership skills that we have gained to really address those issues, because it's not just those who are economically marginalized. There are people who have money who really struggle with the empathic pieces of what makes America America. So someone who can engage all fronts to understand that we have to come together for this greater good of America, to form this perfect union that we want to strive for. I think that's the piece. But Black women have always been there, fighting for a place to be both African American are both Black and a woman, African American and a woman, person of color and a woman. We have fought that. The stressors for women of color are severe. And so for someone to rise to this level the normal level that anybody would go through, a white male would go through, or a white female would go through, or a male of color would go through, and then a black woman. To see that, to look at the history, to look at the path of that and what it takes to get there, we should be truly celebrating that America is living up to its creed.
Absolutely. Yeah, a common or regular conversation that Madam Mayor and I have quite often is, we still are struggling to answer why Black women have to be more educated and why do we have to be more experienced. We're definitely, everything that you're saying, Sister Ramona, is so true, but we're not there. I don't think that we're at that point that even having Ms. Harris in this position, I don't think we're able, neither one of us here on the screen today are able to say, you can't say, well, you know what, I don't have to worry about that doctoral degree. I can just, I've reached my level. I'm good with what I already have. We cannot do that even right now as we celebrate this achievement of having Ms. Harris be this far in that journey.
That is so true.
Yeah, I don't think, do you think, Sister Kara, that society, that we're talking about the majority, that there will come a time where maybe, we don't have to have that doctorate if we're trying to reach a certain point in our careers, because certainly I know many of my European American counterparts. They have made, for instance, vice president of a university with just a master's. Would either of us be able to do that? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that's a serious question, and it's one that the nation is really being forced to reckon with. You have the idea that so many put out there, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, and you have a European man or woman who reaches a certain point of achievement with just a high school diploma, or they were a dropout and they've become president of an organization or something, and they have elevated themselves. But if you have a Black man or woman in that same position, they're uneducated. They shouldn't be in this position. So there's that sort of double standard, and I think it's hard. It's hard looking forward to see a point where we won't have to have those conversations. I think what I look at now is the fact that we are having some of those conversations in a different way than we have in the past, where we are being confronted with these realities and being made to face them in a way that the nation hasn't done in the past. And so that makes me hopeful that someday it could be something that is not as big of an issue. But I absolutely think that it's the bigger hope that I have now is that the conversations that we are having now are taking us somewhere different.
And I think also, I'll agree with you, but I think also HR departments have to look at, what do we mean when we say the best fit for the job? What does that mean? So sometimes, that is code for, you're not getting the job. So when we look at equity issues, what do we mean by best fit? What are you calling best fit? So for a department, for instance, as we talked a little bit about higher education. When we talk about the best fit in a department that is predominantly white or all white, what is the best fit? Is the best fit to find someone who is white? What is the best fit here? But if we're talking about equity, who is the best fit here? What are we wanting to teach our students that are coming, that are the future leaders of our world? And so that is so important. We need to redefine these code words that we do when we're addressing issues of equity and getting past that. And also, does this job really require, does it really need a PhD? Certainly you would think that a vice presidency or a presidency needs a high or a terminal degree, but there are other positions that we need to look at and whether or not those particular credentials are necessary. But I've got to tell you, when I am mentoring young professionals, I do talk to them, and it really doesn't matter what their background is, but I do, in terms of their culture, in terms of their race, doesn't matter. But I do make sure that I tell them, if you're going to stay in higher ed, you need to work towards that terminal degree. You just need to work towards that terminal degree. So that much cannot be said about you not rising to the level or being that fit for the position. And I think that applicants have to ask, so what are you looking for in a candidate?
Exactly.
What do you mean when you say who's fit for this position? Talk to me. That last question they asked. They asked you that very last question in interviews. Do you have any questions for us? Yes. What do you see as a good fit for this position?
Yeah, I do want to, I think, set the record straight on Black people, us people, and education. Most of us, and I know my generation, and most likely your generation, Sister Ramona, our ancestors fought hard for the right for us to be able to go to college. And pretty soon we'll be having this discussion on the history of historically Black colleges and universities. And I know it was instilled in me that a college degree, just your bachelor's, was not enough. Like, I remember my parents likening that to just another high school diploma. But that, you got to get your master's, and depending on where you're going from there, you need to consider getting your doctorate as well. So I do think that that's a standard that we have set upon ourselves historically or culturally. So when we talk about, and I mean, I guess along with that, because I think our ancestors, I can remember my parents and conversations that they were having, they knew that having a college degree and even having a master's degree was not enough. So I think that's also, I think a higher standard that we have placed upon ourselves culturally, because our ancestors saw that it wasn't going to be enough to just stop at a 2-year, a master's degree. It just wasn't going to be enough if we were going to be able to get to, I think they foresaw this, that we could, I know they did, because I remember the conversations, that we could get to the White House, that we could, get to Congress, that we could be president of a university or a corporation. I just strongly, I know that this is what our ancestors were seeing. And so I think that's something that we've just taken on, and that we realize that in order for us to get in here and to be seated, we talk about in this series taking a place at the table. We know that we got to present that to be able to show, hey, I'm qualified to sit here with you.
Well, and I think too, for some reason, this does not resonate more nationwide of the thirst for education that the African American community has and has always during Reconstruction. I can't say this enough. During Reconstruction, when you were able to now be educated and be able to read, African Americans could not get enough of reading, whatever it was. And it did not matter what level you were at. Porters were reading. It wasn't just the school teachers. It was the maids were reading, and then they were teaching the next generation, how to read, how to speak well, how to be your best. These things were taught in our culture, and whenever we were doing those things that will make us, that will move us forward, that will help us, and there were roadblocks put in our way. So it's not that the struggle wasn't there to achieve an education, or that it wasn't so much that a clear road to education was there. There were so many roadblocks. Who was going to teach in this African American community? We'd have to wait till a teacher could come. But while we were waiting, if you knew the most, if you could read the best, if you knew the best math, and you were the one that taught the rest of us all of this. And so those kind of things provide us thirst to move forward. And the sad part about it is those sort of issues, teaching about African Americans in the Second Reconstruction, to know this stuff, you would have to take a class in Black Studies. It's not taught. That respect is not taught. That struggle of a people to the prominence, to the promise that they have now, and where we are now. If you read from slavery through Reconstruction, Second Reconstruction, some say third, and then the Civil Rights Movement and all of that, you can't help, no matter what background you come from, if you just truly look at the struggle of a people, that's enough to be proud about. Right. And that has to be taught. That has to be taught even to our kids. And I remember growing up, and I came from teachers and preachers, so I remember being corrected all the time on your English. And it wasn't about, I never thought that they were trying to make me white. I thought that they were trying to make me, trying to help me have a better future. So never did I ever think that.
Right.
And they were teaching me that I could compete in this free enterprise system, this America that we lived in, that it was meant for me too.
Exactly. Sister Kara, please let me jump in there. My big sister in Savannah is really posting some good questions here. One she posted was some HBCUs focus more on hiring white professors and adjuncts than Black, as if it doesn't matter. And she's asking, does it matter? And I want to hear from both of you. I just want to answer her to say, absolutely, I'm the product of an HBCU. I got excited just now with what Sister Ramona was just talking about, because those topics were a part of my first year curriculum. As a freshman, we had to take those classes and sit through those lectures. So I'm excited. But then I lived in a household where that's what we talked about around the kitchen table. But to answer Sister Glover's question, it does matter, but I made the transition from working at an HBCU to a PWI, and I noticed when I was leaving the HBCUs as a professional that unfortunately we as a people started wanting to work corporate. We no longer felt the moral or cultural obligation to stay with or make the choice to give back to the HBCU that we graduated from. So I pose that question to you two. Does it matter that HBCUs are now, we see more white professors than we do Black professors?
Yeah, I absolutely think it matters, because of the importance of representation and because of the importance of seeing ourselves in a place of that sort of advancement and that sort of movement within society. I think it makes a huge difference to the students that are being taught. Um, I would almost say, and I think I definitely would say, regardless of if it's an HBCU or a PWI or any other institute of higher learning, there is that importance of representation in the staffing. I think there's a challenge there, um, that we see as far as the struggle of people of color in general, of that sense of responsibility. You know, you have, there's a responsibility within our own community to be in those places so that others can see us there. But there's also the pressure um, of showing that we belong in society as a whole. And so when you have folks that are moving out of a traditionally Black community or traditionally a place of authority or elevation within the Black community into the wider social landscape, there's that additional pressure of I have to be the absolute top of my game. I have to be the best of the best because I am a person of color. There's a quote from an article that I was just reading that was stating that there is a recognition that Black women in certain fields at certain levels are often still one of the first, one of the very few, or only in a given environment, and that a third party's experience with us can determine whether we are shattering a glass ceiling for others or providing someone with an excuse to nail it shut. And I think that's so true when it comes to Black women in particular, is we have this additional burden of I'm out there not just for myself, I'm out there for my grandmother who placed such a huge priority on education. I'm out there for my ancestors who believed in the importance of education but were denied it, or who did not have access to some of those realms of higher education, but still taught themselves, ensured that their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren got the educations that were denied to them. And so there's that sense of responsibility, there's a sense of pressure and of stress of, I'm not just out there representing myself, I'm out there representing my culture and my people and my kin and my, you know, those who are gonna come after me, who I am serving as a role model for, who need to see that. So I absolutely think it matters. I think it matters at HBCUs for the students to see that it's not just your student population that is like you, it's your faculty and the people that are in charge of this school who are still representative of what you can achieve in getting this education. I think it's also important for students at a PWI to see the head of your department can be a woman of color or a person of color. The president of the university can be a woman of color or a person of color. The person who is in charge of a board of regents or is in charge of the state or is in charge of your city can be a woman of color or a person of color. So that sense of representation is so important for us because it tells us that everything that we achieve is not the end of our achievement. It's a stepping stone to something else and something bigger.
And I have to say that I have just a little slight take on that. When we look at higher education, we have to understand that there, even with HBCUs, higher education, there's a sea of whiteness. There's whiteness there that we have to challenge ourselves to break through, to understand, is the structural racism, the institutional racism that goes on at the higher ed level. It trickles over to HBCUs, particularly those state HBCUs. They are not run by African Americans, by historical Black lineage in individuals that have that. So we have to understand that too. My alma mater, Prairie View A&M University, was placed there because we could not go to Texas A&M University. African Americans could not go to Texas A&M University. So there's still that ruling governance that has to change the structural system of whiteness that plagues higher education. So that thought trickles down from those who are at the top making those decisions. How diverse are they? So, and if they're not diverse, then how do you expect us to bring that into the classroom, whether a HBCU or a PWI? I'm okay with having non-African Americans or non-Black people teaching at HBCUs if they understand the culture and the climate. That's we're talking about fit for the position. Do you understand the culture and the climate? Do you see excellence in these students that you are teaching? Do you understand the culture? Do you understand the struggle of education among African Americans? Do you know that history? So those are those things that I talk about when we talk about the fit for the job. It's okay. And then can you find yourself to be comfortable here at this university? So those are those kind of things that we have to find ways of asking and being a part, because I know that there are many bicultural individuals who are not people of color, but they still have to do the work to understand how whiteness has impacted the way that they see this thing called normal. And when they do the work, I think that they can begin to see that excellence, and they can be those professors there. But nothing beats being able to see someone who looks like you.
Absolutely.
When you go to the grocery store, when you go to the doctor, or when you go wherever you go, there's no one that looks like you. And you sit in this classroom and then you see the president and you see the vice presidents and you see the faculty and not just that faculty. And it's not just the person teaching the African American studies, which is so important to a university, but you see yourself that's multifaceted, that is not monolithic. And you begin to have that broader worldview. So I think that there is a balance there. I think there's a balance there because a healthy racial identity for people of color is important. It is important in America.
Absolutely. One thing that I think we promised a few people that are tuned in today to this special hot topic, and I think all of this is relevant because these are issues that that Black women face, because typically these topics do come up as far up as we keep climbing. I think they tend to follow us. So bear with us, viewers. Here again, and that's the point that I was making earlier. With that, education is the shoulder that we stand on, and so we could not have this conversation of first Black woman of anything without talking about education and the importance of it, because that's how we rise. We don't get to rise because our father owns DuPont or Kellogg. We rise because we paid our dues through the struggle of however it was that we paid for this education and for these letters that we have behind our name. But in this conversation, we wanted to define the difference between Black women or African American women and women of color. And so most women, and if please feel free if either of you would like to share, how do you like to be identified? Most people prefer Black as opposed to African American, but the conversation also has come up with Ms. Harris. How do we refer to her? Is she a Black woman or is she a woman of color? Ms. Harris, or Sarah Harris, is of East Indian, British East Indian, and Jamaican American descent. So her mother is of British East Indian descent, and her father is Jamaican American. I would prefer to refer to her, and I've heard her refer to herself as a woman of color. Here lately, very recently, I, for the first time, heard Afro-Indian from her. So when we know, and can we agree or disagree, and I want both of you to weigh in on it, that when there is obvious bicultural DNA there, or you know, it's an obvious mixture of cultures in an individual, cultural etiquette, do we refer to them women or people of color, or do we all just claim it? We all are of African descent. Do we say Black or African American?
I think that's huge. I think that's such a huge thing because, you know, it's happening with Kamala Harris. It happened with Barack Obama. And I think it has something to do with the pigeonholing that we often see for Black people in general, but also people of color at large, is that throughout your life, you can be identified as a person of color or of mixed origin, but in that moment where they're stepping into, it's not unique to the political realm, but I think we see it more broadcast there. They suddenly become one thing or another. And one thing I've seen with Kamala Harris has been, on one side, you have them pigeonholing her as she's the first Black person to be in this place. On the other side, I've seen articles that are talking about where they've interviewed from the Indian side and the discussion of her responsibility to those of Indian ancestry. And so it's just this division of her background that happens because she has to be in some, or for some reason in the public eye, one thing or the other. She has to be representative of all Black womanhood for Black people. She has to be representative of all Indian womanhood for those of that ancestry. And it's that question for me of why? Why do I have to be limited to that? Why do I have to split myself? Or for her, why should she have to split herself to, you're not just representing the American people, you're representing all of Black people, you're representing all of Indian Americans or those of Indian ancestry. And who is she going to serve when she steps into that role? Again, I think we talked about it earlier, is her job is to serve the American people. So the question that she might have favoritism towards one half of her personal identity is an unfair assumption, I think, in comparison to historically white presidents and white vice presidents and white senators and leadership who are assumed they are going to serve everyone, despite what sometimes their track record shows as not serving people of color. But when it comes to a person of color, the assumption is the reverse of that. They are only going to serve their own, and somehow that makes them less qualified to serve all of the American people.
And I'll add to that. I'll just come out the block and say Kamala Harris is who she says she is. So, just like me, for me, you can call me African American, you can call me Black. Either way, I'm okay with that. One of the things that I love about this is that we were talking about this sense of responsibility. To whom much is given, much is required. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. She knows these things. These are the things that I'm talking about. These are the really great, rich leadership skills that people of color bring to the table. We've resolved this within ourselves. We understand that people are going to question our fitness for this because of our cultural identity, because of our gender, because of some social identity that we have that's different from the norm. And so I would say Kamala Harris is who she is. She understands that she has a sense of responsibility to the little girls, the little Indian girls that are growing up that are looking at, because we're celebrating. Let me tell you guys, we are celebrating. I'm an HBCU person. I'm celebrating Kamala Harris. I am in the D9 community. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta, Shirley Chisholm's sorority. I am celebrating the D9 family. It's these things we want to claim something to that too, which is not bad. But the person who's in the role understands that too. She knows that Black women and African American women are celebrating her. And she knows that there is a point of responsibility that these women may place upon her, but that it's no different than anyone that would place upon a leader. Those are some things that we expect. So we know that you have this very rich, diverse experience that has been built on equity. The quest for equity. And so these are the things that I think make good leaders and make them fit for the office. You have climbed up this ladder. So you can handle. I have all respect that Kamala Harris, like President Obama, like Shirley Chisholm, I looked at some of her interviews. She was on it. You can handle these questions about your own culture and whether or not you can be for the people. Yes, I can be for the people because I have been for the people. I didn't just start this role. I have been for the people. In my road to the place where I am now, I've had to use those leadership skills to get me here. So one of the things that we as leaders of color, women of color, we have to make sure that we stay healthy and we are not allowing people to change the narrative as whether or not we're fit for office by focusing on our gender and our culture. Kamala Harris is going to tell you she is vice president. Okay. If we get the nominations, if we get the vote, but right now she is the Democratic nominee for vice president. That's who she is. Mm-hmm. That is what her career is built towards that trajectory. And she can do that. So now you can ask me questions. If you want to know how I practice ethnic work, I can tell you. I'll give you a few recipes or what have you. I'll tell you a little bit about my sorority or what have you. I can do all of those things too. But let me tell you what I can do. Exactly. Is I can lead in this capacity. And I think that's what's strong. And I have to say this. That's what African American Black women do. That's it. We got to help you keep the narrative. When I was telling you, when I ran the correctional facility, I understood my staff was having a hard time because their normal was turned upside down. They had no idea if this young Black woman could lead this correctional facility. Can she do this? So it was on me to say, hey guys, I am so comfortable being who I am, but we have got a job to do here. So let me give you a so working with African Americans, and at that time we had no African American offenders in the facility. And so this was something new, just something new. And then a woman running a male correctional facility, this was something new. So I had to understand that so I could get them to the point of understanding that this is about this job. Okay, I know this is this newness. Let's take it in. It's gonna be all right. So those things that you're gonna have to do a few of those things. But you know what? We're not gonna linger on it long though, because we had a job to do. We've got a job to do. And that, I mean, I love that spiritedness. And Shirley Chisholm, let me just tell you, looking at those interviews and hearing her talk in 1972, and even before that, when she was in Congress, to hear her speak, I'm like, that is a legend within itself.
Exactly.
To have that foresight to lead and be committed to lead people.
Resident facilitator, Sister Kara, I know we're going a few minutes over. Do you have any closing remarks for us this afternoon?
Yes, so I want to just say thank you to the group in general. Thank you, Ms. Curtis. Thank you, Sister Bernadine, and to the group that has been putting on these conversations. Thank you for creating these spaces where we can have this sort of conversation, which is so important, I think, right now. I think what's important about this conversation is, as we're talking about Black women, women of color, BIPOC, whatever you want to define it as, we need to understand where we're coming from in terms of these narratives. And it's not just that in talking about a first within our people's history or background, that we're saying that they are breaking the glass ceiling or breaking a color barrier. But it's important that we understand that in the greater framework that we're talking and working within, being first does not mean being the last. That Kamala Harris is not the end of Black achievement in terms of politics. Being the first Black vice president, if that's what she becomes, or Black or vice president of color, or however she would define that, is not the end of that achievement. Barack Obama being the first, often defined as being the first Black president, is not the end of Black achievement. And that does not mean that he should be the last or the only to have ever served in that place. Being the first Black person in any arena does not mean that that is the end of achievement, and does not mean that equality or equity has been achieved in those areas. So it's important to understand that every time we're talking about these firsts, we're talking about a moment that is creating pathways, not ending the road. So I take hope in this conversation that we're recognizing that we are on a path. We're not at the end of a journey. We're at the beginning of one. And I look forward to seeing how the conversations that we continue having propel us forward on that journey. So thank you both for being part of this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
Well, thank you, Sister Kara, for being a part of this conversation as well. And I would just like to close with, unfortunately, this isn't the last time that we will quite possibly have this conversation, sadly enough. And so this is where, as we're seated at the table with our European brothers and sisters and colleagues, that if you would just simply acknowledge the experience that we're bringing, the education that we have, the ability to be able to do the same things as you do, that we could just simply look at the color of our skins to just celebrate a rich culture and heritage, and not let that be the weight of who we are, or just the sum total of who we are. I'd like to close with Mr. Colin Powell, who spoke so powerfully the other night, this is a man, and we got to give props to the Jamaican, to our West Indies, our Jamaican brothers and sisters too, because that is Ms. Harris's father's heritage. So that's her Jamaican side. So we do give big ups to them people over there. So, but Colin Powell the other night said, he's the descendant of Jamaicans born and raised in the Bronx. And he said, we're having these conversations about who Kamala Harris is. Is she black? Is she white? Is she Indian? Is she Jamaican? Is she African? And for him to stand up that evening and to say, but if I were driving and if I'm stopped by a police officer, without a doubt, I'm black. I'm black. And so this is the narrative that European Americans have written. They've started this, and if it's going to end, then it has to end with them. We know who we are. We know our struggles to be where we are and how we've become who we are. Yet still, we're ready to take our places at the table. And this is why we have these discussions. And this is the space in order to do that. And we're very grateful to the Southside Community Association, the Murdoch Community Center. Sister Curtis, it's always a pleasure to have you on the screen.
Thank you.
We're thankful to our viewers. Thank you so much. And in ending, I'd like to dedicate this broadcast to a very special man, Mr. Winston Tees, who passed away on last evening. He is the father of our beloved Dr. Martin Tees here in Flagstaff. His father passed away, and the Teeses are a very familiar name here in the state of Arizona, who have made major contributions to education and to the religious communities here in the state. So, Mr. Tees, we are thankful for your life, and now he has passed on to sit among the ancestors, and we pray that he will continue to guide us and protect us from on high. We love you, Flagstaff, Arizona. Georgia's in the house. Texas is in the house. We love you all. Thank you. Go and be well. We'll see you again soon. Peace.